the rich, feed the poor, till there are no rich no more. I love to change the world, but I don't know what to do. So I leave it up to you. Population keeps on bleeding, nation bleeding, still more bleeding economy. Life is funny, skies are sunny, bees make honey, who needs money, monopoly.
Welcome again, everyone, to Mike Montagne on Mathematically Perfected Economy and Absolute Consensual Representation. I am the 1968 author, architect of Mathematically Perfected Economy, founder of People for Mathematically Perfected Economy, and principal author of a worldwide mandate proving an ever-evident fact of one problem and one solution, each proposition of which, from its inception, remains ever evident in the ever demonstrable facts, which can and will avert what is no more than an imposed, artificial, and wholly avoidable global monetary failure. These programs pertain to my original, ever unrefuted 1968 theses that any purported economy subject to interest inevitably terminates itself under fatal artificial sums of insoluble debt, and that there is one and one only integral solution for the categoric faults of the pretended economies which have been imposed upon the world, a singular solution which, for over 35 years, we have called mathematically perfected economy. Likewise, I am the original author of computer models proving this thesis of inevitable failure and singular solution, which models in fact were provided to the Reagan administration, and in 1983 and 4 projected that the present global imposed live economy would suffer its inevitable artificial failure at approximately 2010 AD, unless either the governments of the world or the people adopted mathematically perfected economy. Over 40 years of advocating a fact of inevitable failure and singular solution, every United States president since and including Gerald Ford has been presented a proposition of mathematically perfected economy. Today, nonetheless, the fact remains that every government of the world persists in perpetuating the crimes of these pretended economies, not by proof of justification, because there is none, but instead, of course, by no more than evasion. Now, owing to long-term political evasion designed to perpetuate the present crimes against us, the very prescription for saving us from the lie of economy is now embodied in the present mandate for mathematically perfected economy and absolute consensual representation. This vital salvation of the very possibility of prosperity transforms each and every present system of exploitation into mathematically perfected economy, not only immediately, but even without cost. If we are to spare ourselves the terminal consequences, therefore, of perhaps the most monumental crime in history, we, the people, must not only master the causes of our present predicament, we must master a fact of one solution, of a readily understood fact of one actual, just, sustainable, mathematically perfected economy. We must likewise recognize that if we are ever to have such a thing, over the present denial of representation, that our dire need is to reassert the principles of liberty, justice, and representation which serve us, only because men who came before us too did so, as the conditions of their time likewise made rectitude necessary. The original work we discuss here is the most vastly plagiarized and compromised monetary thesis in history. Now, unfortunately, we must understand its recent imitations too then, if we are now, under critical circumstances, to recognize and to unite upon a fact that work before you proved over 40 years ago, that there is, in fact, one solution, one and one only fact of a mathematically perfected economy. Thus, if it were not for all the plagiarism and division, we might have had solution long ago. Thus, even from its beginning, this original thesis of mathematically perfected economy disproved every recent pretended contending proposition of solution over 40 years ago. From its very inception, mathematically perfected economy was a proof of singular solution, a proof that nothing else solves the categoric faults of pretended economy, that nothing else truly solves the fundamental causes of the present artificial failure. These programs, therefore, apprise the people of the various countries of the world how to transform the systems of exploitation which have been imposed upon us into mathematically perfected economy. 8 initial introductory programs are best negotiated in order, as previous material develops a vital background for what follows. Links to archives of this and previous programs are available at tnsradio.com under the category Mike Montagne, and to the domain perfectedeconomy.org. Respondents can sign national instances of our worldwide mandate for mathematically perfected economy and absolute consensual representation at perfectedeconomy.org. This program is broadcast regularly at 2 p.m. Pacific Time, 10 p.m. UTC, each Saturday, today on January 22nd, 2011, from TNS Radio, tnsradio.com, Tirnasar, Land of the Free. Original material copyright and trademarked by Mike Montagne, all rights reserved. This week's program continues last week's interview with the New World Order resistance.
I think we were around the turn of the century, and I was hoping to take it in the direction of developing a little bit of an explanation in the history of warfare in the United States and through our financial system, the relationship between the Federal Reserve, our political system, and the war machine. And one of the points, I guess we could start around 1904 with Jacob Schiff, who was the head of the New York investment firm Kuhn and Loeb and Company, and he'd raised a lot of capital for war loans to Japan, and it was the funding that the Japanese were able to launch the attacks against the Russians at Port Arthur in the following year, 1905. And basically decimate the Russian fleet. Those with loans from the Schiff war machine, really, the war profiteer. So, I mean, I'm trying to establish the facts that people can look up and verify for themselves. But you just go on from 1905, and you'll see that he was also one of the financiers of the campaign of Woodrow Wilson. He and the Warburg brothers were basically on a mission to. A lot of people say that would say that they were on a mission to grasp control of the financial system of the United States, and that we were ripe for being taken. And as a reaction to the trust buster, to Teddy Roosevelt, they put up, along with J.P. Morgan and the Rockefellers, they put up a false flag operation that brought on the Panic of 1907, which led them down the road to gaining acceptance of the idea of a Federal Reserve, a central bank system that the country had been around and around with over and over. And you can see through history, you can map it, and there are documented records of Jacob Schiff also financing Trotsky and Lenin in the Bolshevik Revolution, along with Max Warburg, the brother of Paul Warburg, who was the architect of the United States Federal Reserve System, along with Senator Aldrich. And this coincidence that it lines up along with the push and the passage of the 16th Amendment and the income tax, which provided a cash cow and a laundromat for the war profiteers in the banks and within our political system. And you can see the process take place and everything fall into place for the financing of the First World War and our involvement in the First World War, and a motivation for us to be involved in the First World War and leave the position of neutrality. And then the expansion and contraction of the monetary supply and the expansion contraction of credit, which brought on the Depression. Later on, going into the Second World War, the same process, even involving Prescott Bush at the Union Bank, where there's a relationship with I.G. Farben that is verifiable. There's an open record that they were charged as basically conspiring with the Germans during the Second World War, the lead up to and the rise of Hitler to power. Many people say that that's an intentional process, again orchestrated by the bankers, which led to the ultimate destruction of Germany, which allowed the banks to gain even more control. The Hegelian process of creating a crisis, and then which results in your ulterior motive being played out, and your ability to take control of the situation, including the banking systems of entire countries. Through the process of war, instigating a crisis, then decimating that country, then loaning that country the money to rebuild through something like the International Monetary Fund or the World Bank, and basically enslaving that country in debt. And this is a perfect opportunity to ask Mike to take it from there. If you want to go back to the Warburg brothers and Jacob Schiff at 1905. Right up to 1913, when the Federal Reserve Act was passed. If you could lead up, maybe you enlighten us your viewpoints on my poor dissertation of history.
Poor my butt. That was great, William. No responsible citizen can steer away from these inseparable facts. The fact of the matter is, we don't like to think of it in this way, but the fact, for instance, that I've provided a proposition of mathematically perfected economy and inevitable failure to every president since and including Gerald Ford says a lot. You mentioned Schiff being involved in the election of Wilson, which leads to the creation of the Federal Reserve System, the so-called Federal Reserve System, despite the fact that the 1912 Democrat Party platform promised that if the Democrats were returned the reins of power, they would not create a central bank. And as we mentioned on break, this was the original